Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with your charismatic host and prominent safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Be entertained and informed as the Safety Doc discusses both best and bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. The truth will keep you safe. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast. I am here today with Bri Hansen. We're going to talk about international traveling and how to stay safe on foreign grounds, or how to be safer. So a lot of different things we're going to cover. Bri's been to a number of places I've never been to, places I can only imagine, and has some interesting stories to share with us, and then also just pointers if you are planning a trip to foreign grounds, how to be safer. So Bri is a 20-something-year-old frequent international traveler, including over a dozen trips to Haiti. In January, she co-produced a documentary for an international nonprofit that nearly escaped disaster on more than one occasion. Today, Bri is going to help inform us on safety factors when traveling to foreign grounds. So, Bri, welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Starting out with our first question, tell us about some of the places you've traveled to and your purposes for traveling to those destinations.
Okay. I have been to France. I spent about a month there when I was 16. I spent about a month in Mexico when I was 18. A few months in Haiti over several years. And then shorter trips to Jamaica and Canada and Spain.
So were those like school affiliated or church affiliated, or just kind of exploring, reconnaissance?
Yeah, most of the trips were independent. I had made friends and I just wanted to go visit and see what their life was like. And then most of the trips in Haiti have been for missions purposes, helping things with churches, and then the time in France was kind of like a friendship with a foreign exchange student that we hosted. I went back to visit his family there in France.
Wow, that's amazing. Just for the record, I visited 5 new states in the last 50 days. So, and I think I've been to Canada once when I was young, and I remember the only place my parents went was a place that served pizza because they were comfortable with that. So, so you've done a lot of traveling, and or at least relative here to the Safety Doc. So I've talked a lot about tacit knowledge on the show. Meaning when people have a certain gut feeling that they recognize, and I mentioned it a few times specifically relative to, there was a research study with David Klein, and he had a number of graduate students assigned to firehouses out on the West Coast, and they would go out on fire calls and watch the firefighters, and then following the wrap-up of the fire call would interview the firefighters and try to understand the decision-making during that dynamic context and situation. One of the questions that came up was, why did you get off the roof when you did? Or why was that call made? And nobody could really come up with that, of saying, why I came off the roof. And there's a term for that. It's called having a soft roof, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a feeling that the roof itself is soft. It's just more of a terminology of saying there's this gut feeling or this tacit knowledge within the firefighter of knowing it's time to get off this roof. So in your international travels, have you felt that kind of tacit feeling or that gut knowledge of, I need to really pay attention to what's happening around me because I'm not sure I'm fully comfortable with this? Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay.
There was one time in particular I was on a solo trip to Haiti. I think I was 17-ish, and I had really proud of myself, got everything established, got on the plane, got there, forgot to write down the address of the place that I was going to. So on the little document that you need to fill out for your immigration, I just left it blank. And I figured they don't really have addresses in Haiti. It's kind of like maybe a street, but you don't get mail at your house. And then I ended up kind of in a locking cell at the airport.
Whoa, okay. Tell us more about that.
So then I got nervous. They wouldn't let me through to get my luggage and find my host person that I was supposed to meet outside. They just ushered me into this tiny room with a desk and then a man with a machine gun sitting at the door guarding this room. So my flags were going off. I had lots of alarms.
Right, yes, as you're sharing that with me, I'm thinking yes.
The roof
yes.
was not just soft, there were holes that was falling through the roof. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So how did that get straightened out?
Well, I assume it's because there were some political uprising things happening. I was a young white girl. That doesn't really happen very much to travel into Haiti by yourself. So a few people came in, tried to talk to me in Creole. At that time, I spoke very little. I just kept saying, I don't understand. And then they would shuffle around until someone else came in and would talk to me. It probably lasted 10 minutes, but in my mind, it was like 4 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Because I was nervous and hot and sweaty. And then the guard just got up and left. And I took that as my opportunity to also get up and leave.
Oh my.
I found my bag. I very quickly pretended like I was with another group from another plane that came in. And then I just skimmied on out of there.
So right now the Haiti authorities watching this video are like, aha,
Yeah,
that's
they
where
might come
she
find
is.
me, yeah.
So, oh my goodness. Well, I'm thinking that would completely terrify me to be in that situation, especially at age 17. So that happened to you at 17. You've been to Haiti over a dozen times. Is there a pattern you've learned of what to recognize when your safety? I don't know if it necessarily would be compromised, but just kind of that gut feeling to recognize earlier in the process of, yeah, I want to make sure, I can tell that I'm being scrutinized, so I want to make sure that I have these things ready, or I know that this is typically areas that receive more observation. I'm not sure, has it gotten easier traveling, or is it still like the same level of vigilance and not really knowing every time you make that trip?
It's definitely easier now.
Okay.
I know things like writing down the address of the place you plan to go to is a good idea. Yeah, I kind of have a huge checklist of things that I do
Oh my
before
goodness.
I travel.
Wow.
So we can go through that at some point if you want to.
Yeah, actually now would be
Yeah.
a great time to do that.
Sure. So before any trip I plan everything out. I have a binder, an itinerary, like every hour, every day, where I plan to be, and then I keep a copy for myself. I keep a copy in my bags that I check, because sometimes those get lost and you can't really rely on that to be with you at all times. And then I leave a copy with my trusted person at home who kind of keeps tabs on me, which is my mom.
So then your mom could text, or you'd probably have it saved on your phone, I'm guessing now too?
No,
Maybe?
I like paper copies.
Okay.
But you could do that.
Wow. So hour by hour,
I
I've
do.
never really heard
I
of.
do that a lot for road trips or other
So
excursions like that.
So what brought you to deciding to go hour by hour? I mean, with all your experiences, how did you say hour by hour is the best way to do this?
Because I know I'm going to land at this hour. I know it should take me about this long to get from point A to point B, and then I'm going to spend this amount of time in this place. I plan to leave at noon and go to this other location. So it kind of helps me have a checklist of what am I going to need to prepare for all of these different parts of my trip, because not all parts of your trip are created equal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Anything from your checklist you want to mention? I saw a few things on there. Credit cards, things like that.
Yeah, so it depends on what part of the world you're traveling. If you're going to a third world country, credit cards probably aren't your best bet because they don't really use them. But in a lot of places where they do take credit cards, you can get the kind with the chips, which are pretty common now.
Okay.
Most places take that, but they have a pretty big fee if you use them. And also you need to tell your credit card company before that you're going to travel, what dates, so that they don't freeze it on you, because you don't want that to be frozen when you need it the most.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what else?
You have to figure out where you're traveling, what kind of adapters they have, what kind of voltage they have. So you think you can plug in as soon as you get somewhere, and then you can't.
All right.
So you need to research all of these things beforehand, which is why I really love my itinerary binders, because it has all of these things figured out beforehand. So I know when I get to Germany, it'll be okay, but then when I get to France, I'm going to need to change over to a different voltage.
Okay.
For like your hair dryers and things that are really important.
Wow. Things I've never even thought about. Okay.
And then there's the medicine and medical insurance providers. You need to check and make sure you have coverage when you're overseas, because that doesn't always apply. And regardless, you should get traveler's insurance, medical insurance, because they will helicopter you out of no matter where you are. Usually it's like $20. It's always worth it, in my opinion.
So how do you do that? Like, you're just contacting your insurance provider and saying...
You can go through your insurance, or you can go through, like airlines often will have would you like to buy traveler's insurance?
That's amazing. I didn't know that. Wow.
That can cover you if your trip gets canceled or delayed. So if that's a big issue, you're going for a wedding and you really need to get there, you may want traveler's insurance. Yeah.
Wow.
So those are important pieces.
And how about, I guess, how do you understand the medical that's provided in different areas? So if you were to, be injured and there isn't any ambulance or anything nearby, how do you I guess, prepare for that? Or do you specifically pack first aid, or does somebody, like with your group, or how does that kind of happen?
I always will pack a first aid kit, kind of a general one, because you never want to be somewhere and then have to be scrolling through your dictionary and figuring out, how to translate diarrhea and figuring out what kind of medication to get from the corner store. Just bring those like 10 essential things with you, your aspirin and your ibuprofen and all of those, and any of your prescription medications. Bring those with, even if they need to be refrigerated. Airlines have to allow you to bring them and keep them refrigerated.
Okay.
So ice packs are good to go through that way. They'll check them, but that's all fine. But otherwise, it depends on what country you're traveling in for their emergency systems, if they even have ambulances, if they have 911 numbers. Look it up before you go. Otherwise, have trusted friends and people you can call. And
I worked with someone who, right out of high school, road tripped to Alaska with his best friend, and they were hiking, and he fell down this kind of cliff face and broke his ankle. And other than that was okay, but couldn't move, and there was nobody around, so he stayed. He had enough, water and food, and his friend had to then hike out and get help. And I think it was a day before help returned for him. So he didn't sound nearly as prepared as you were.
Well, hiking is a totally different game. I'm mostly speaking about places that have some infrastructure, but if you're out in the woods, that's a totally different ball game with GPS trackers and leave no trace systems and
and this I think was prior to the days of like GPS. And you mentioned GPS, so this gets off a little bit, but how does GPS work or not work in some of these locations?
Well, depends. Lots of variance here when you're talking about the whole globe. But typically if you have access to Wi-Fi, then you have access to Google Maps, which is a lifesaver. Even if you don't have Wi-Fi when you leave that exact location, you can take a screenshot. That way you have that picture of that map on your phone that you can reference later if you don't have a printed out map.
Okay.
And that has saved my butt quite a few times. Especially if you're going to a place where you walk a lot, then you can Google Map your walk directions and figure out which road you need to turn at.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to kind of highlight a trip that you took in January to Haiti, and Bri was part of a film crew that was doing a documentary, and now the documentary's in production. But you shared something from that trip that and I might not have this exactly right, so you can clarify any points. But at one aspect of filming, somebody had approached your film crew, and they were on a motorcycle, and claimed that the process of filming had resulted in some light reflecting toward them, obscuring them, and almost causing them possibly to have an accident, or just making it unsafe for them on the motorcycle. So they approached, being unhappy about this. Whether that was accurate or not sure. Whether they were saying that because it was genuine, or whether they were saying that because here are people who have expensive equipment, and if I make this claim, maybe I can get some money or get something.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Yeah,
so how does that happen where you protect your valuable not only expensive cameras and things like that, but then also the cash that you might have and just personal belongings from someone who's saying, if you don't give me these things, I'm going to make a report to the authorities that you put my life at risk, and also its authorities, and I don't know how law enforcement works in Haiti, but throughout countries it's going to be different. Tell us about that situation, how you navigated it, and that I think is, if I'm traveling somewhere, that's probably, as a new traveler to, let's say, Haiti, if I was placed in this situation, I don't know what I would do, because I think I would be pretty intimidated by it, especially if someone was saying, if you don't give me this, then this is going to be the consequence. So I think that's where people watching the show can really get some helpful ideas, so you don't end up almost being extorted for your possessions.
Well, it always helps to have a guide, someone who speaks the language, so you can mediate some of those situations a little easier. If we didn't have one of those, my broken Creole could have maybe worked out. I would have said, "Sir, this isn't even a reflector. It's to block the sun, so there's no way that it was shining in your eyes as you were riding your motorcycle down this mountain, and so you don't need any compensation." I don't know if my Creole skills are that good.
Okay.
So guides are always great to have. Otherwise, making sure, well, if you have expensive equipment like that, making sure you have the permits that you need for it. So if someone comes up and says, "Hey, you're not allowed to be here," you can prove that you have the right to be where you're filming. So knowing camera laws, knowing drone laws, don't fly those unless you're allowed to. And then, honestly, it never hurts just to have some cash in your back pocket, so you can kind of shoo away bothersome people who either want to be movie stars and in your show,
right,
or then you just pretend to film them for a while because it's entertaining, and they think they're important in playing a part, and then you can,
Wow.
push them off the scene and continue on, or just give them the money, or have someone else argue with them until they leave.
Okay. Have you encountered where someone actually has gone to law enforcement and has brought law enforcement back, or not?
I try not to get involved with the law enforcement no matter where I go. General rule of thumb, it's not really where I want to be.
All right.
In Haiti, I don't really know that they have police. They have some UN people who are there to control crowds. But if there's a dispute, then you don't call the police. Just the local people will come out from the village and they talk it through and beat up somebody who needs to get beat up, and then everyone goes on with their merry way. So
Wow.
there's no formal police there in
Okay.
particular.
So you mentioned a guide. Like, how do you find a guide? So how does that happen?
I've usually found them through friends,
Okay.
family, people that friends may know of that has the week off or would be willing to tote around with me for the time that I'm there.
Right. I mean, that seems like that would make the process so much more streamlined and safe, because the guide is going to be able to communicate. And then certainly if someone is approaching you and the guide is fluent, that's going to change that whole interaction also.
And contacting like a local college or community college where somebody is bilingual, they usually have more time off and are more willing and free to travel around with you and be your guide, even though if they're not an official guide through a government system.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So this brings me back. I had a friend who worked at a university as a disability services coordinator, and for years he made a trip to Russia and would take wheelchairs and other types of equipment that was just hard to get into the country for people with disabilities. And he shared these incredible stories of having to do these negotiations to make sure that these things finally got to their destinations in rural parts of Russia. Of having to pay so much, or to have to swap out something along the way with someone, just so that that package that got further down on its destination. He got pretty skilled at it, actually. Retired a few years ago, but I would sit with amazement and wide eyes as he would tell these stories, which seemed scary, but at the same time he had done it so often, he felt in control of, I guess, as in control as you can be of the situation, and then also did have connections, of course, that he was working with in Russia to do this act of humanitarian aid, but did say yes. I mean, that this whole process was done through all of these covert exchanges of either money or whatever else he was bringing from the state. I think one thing, now I remember, it was jeans. It was jeans. It was like Levi's. Like,
Very
those things were
important
gold.
things, yeah.
So yes, he would pack these and somehow whatever and trade those out. So
being culturally competent is an extremely huge, broad term, and I think the only way to really be competent is being in a location like that, but you have to do it in a way that's respectful and doesn't get you into trouble. And so talking to people who live there, or locals, or even talking to someone else who has visited that, they can really give you a lot of tips that you can't find in a textbook.
Yeah.
And bribes and those kinds of things are one of those cultural
I know it
issues.
sounds weird that we're talking about that, and yet that is the way that it goes. So how does this happen though in Haiti, for example, where, well, first of all, there's again, somebody's watching this saying, I thought it was going to be in that documentary, so they're going to have to break the news to their family. If no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make the final cut.
That's what the bloopers are for.
So,
yeah.
So how does it happen though that they don't go back and say, I got $5 from that film crew over there, and then all of a sudden there's a line of people wanting their $5 because light has shown or dust has kicked up in their area. how
Yeah, I wouldn't
How's
recommend doing
that?
that. I wouldn't
Okay.
recommend just paying to get rid of people, otherwise you're encouraging more people to come.
Right.
So try not to do it.
So basically, when you were paying, it was because this person was allegedly inconvenienced or as put at risk because of this light, mystic light that shined upon them,
Right.
which they thought came from your
No,
filming.
this motorcycle man did not get paid.
No.
There was
Okay.
an argument. We kind of turned the camera around and captured it. He was not happy with that. He didn't want to be a movie star, and so then he drove off.
Okay.
So the camera can either be a deterrent or it can attract people, and in that case, it was a good enough deterrent. He was well on his way. And then a few hours later, as he was coming back up the mountain, we turned everything off, set it all down, and kind of scurried down the hill a little bit so that he wouldn't see us and we couldn't be accused of shining lights in his eyes. And then he didn't bother us, and I think he shook his fist at us.
Oh
but
my
he
goodness.
didn't do anything about it.
So if you're traveling somewhere, how do you, and you have valuables, how do you make sure that you preserve those? Because obviously once somebody starts to see a camera or things like that, so I'm assuming you want to have those things packed up, but maybe more in an inconspicuous bag, or
Right.
how does that work? I'm just thinking anything you might take. I mean, it even could be as simple as a cell phone
Right.
or...
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be flashy. So hiding things or taking off your jewelry is always recommended, especially in Haiti.
Okay.
And then if I'm bringing anything expensive with, I always keep it in my carry-on because I've had bags that have been lost and returned to me the day that I'm leaving. And so
Wow.
really, if you have essentials like medication or electronics or things that you cannot live without, keep them in your carry-on. Don't physically ever let go of them. And then only bring it out when you know that it's safe, because you don't know where you have permission, and it can upset a lot of people if you just stick a camera in their face
Yeah.
and they didn't say you could do that. I know I wouldn't be happy with that.
So one of the things that I did today is I'm dressing in almost the same way that I dressed when we went to Disney after consulting with the travel coordinator that set up our Disney trip. Now, granted, Disney is not traveling to a foreign country, but one of the words of advice was probably avoid like logoed clothing or something that identifies you specifically to one area, which I'm going back thinking of a trip I took to Boston, and everything I wore was completely logoed and identified me to one specific city. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, typically, so, I'm just wearing a obviously black, zip up, jacket, and then plain red shirt, and that was something actually I saw quite a bit at Disney. It really surprised me that I would say 80% of the people were dressed in kind of a similar fashion where they were not wearing logoed clothing. So apparently they either had the same consultant or the same website that my consultant went to. But is that something too of, when you assemble your wardrobe, of either are you trying to blend in? I mean, because you're not going to totally blend in, but what considerations do you give to I guess
Travelers?
Travelers.
Yeah. My goal is to always blend in. I don't want to cause a scene and draw attention to myself, because either I'm traveling because I want to learn about the culture, so I don't want to change what's happening with me being there, or I'm going and I have expensive things and I'm trying to capture something, and I don't want to change what's happening, and so I try never to wear even anything with English printed. Even if it's not a brand, if it's some phrase or something, I just try to steer clear of that, and then to be aware of what's appropriate in different areas that you travel, because even within a country there could be different cultural norms going to church, for example. If you go to church somewhere else, you may need to dress a completely different way than a church in another part of the country or a church here. So just asking before you pack and before you go to someone who has been there and in a similar situation is pretty key.
So I think one of the redundant themes that you're sharing is talk to somebody who's been there before, and just how invaluable that can be with the little pointers that are going to come out of saying, hey, this is something you want to consider, this is something when you are traveling in this part of the country that might be kind of just unique to this part of the country. So
yeah, there's no global one-size-fits-all. I can't say you can wear a t-shirt and be appropriate no matter where you go. It's the globe doesn't work like that.
So, Bri, this is the time when we want you to tell us a story that is going to be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that actually happened to somebody and it happened to you. And what would that story be in traveling? And maybe from a start to finish of when it wrapped up, regarding personal safety, of then how you kind of got back on track or reflected upon that experience. What would one of those stories be?
My embassy story wasn't good enough.
Okay, no, that's, I mean, for me, that is completely, yes.
Let me think. I once broke up a bar fight when I was in Chinacates, Mexico, and I don't speak a lick of Spanish.
Okay.
And I was 18, and there was I think it was a quinceañera was going on, and I peeked my head in and didn't know anyone there, but was told that I could go in. So I went in and kind of checked the place out, came outside. There were two guys who were clearly angry with each other. I don't need to speak Spanish to know that they were clearly not having a good time. And then it turned into this physical thing, and I was the only other person out there besides these two guys. And so this is something I probably shouldn't have done.
Okay.
But I just kind of walked up to them and I started yelling in English. I didn't know what else to do. And then they both stopped and looked at me, and I kind of got between them and went towards the friendlier looking of the two and shuffled him away. And then a few other people came in during that time and were pulling them away, and they ended up bloody, and this guy's on the ground, and I'm yelling to someone to go get help. I don't know what that means, what kind of help they're going to get.
Right.
And it's in English, so I don't know if anyone understood anyways, but I was kind of holding this guy on the ground with his, he had a big gash on his forehead, so I was holding some cloth against that until some other people came, and then I just backed away and didn't know if I dreamt it, but, those kind of things you don't expect to happen. They're in the moment things, and so, yeah, I probably shouldn't have interfered with that, but it worked out okay for me, so.
So was that something then, you got back where you were staying, or was it like a couple weeks later after you returned back to the United States and you reflect upon it? It's just this aha moment of, I can't believe I did that. Like, oh my goodness, I put myself at risk, and then, I mean, it's yourself at risk, but then, of course, you have to think of everyone. If anything happened to me, then it impacts my family and impacts friends like that. Was there ever that kind of just waking up moment of thinking, oh my goodness, I don't realize how close I really was to putting myself in harm's way?
I think I realized that as I was on the ground and everyone was shouting in Spanish, and I'm holding this guy bloody, wondering, I don't know what kind of condition he is. I'm in no medical field at all.
Right.
It kind of dawned on me that I'm in a very unique situation, and this may not have been the best place for me to be, but I felt safe enough, and I don't think I would change it. I don't think I would have not done it now, but I think I'm way more cautious now into what situations I'm putting myself in, especially when you don't understand the scenario. You don't understand what's going on. But I didn't think about it. You just act when you're in those scenes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Yes. When I was in high school, And it wasn't too long ago that students went to prom, I think a week ago, and a student asked me, when did I go to prom? And I had to think, I'm like, 27 years ago. And I was like, that's a long time. And but then I did play We're Not Gonna Take It Anymore by Twisted Sister, and even though that song came out in '84, it is still very popular with today's generation. So kind of bridged that gap and didn't make me feel quite as ancient. But I'm thinking back, when I was 18, 20 years old, it was very uncommon for schools, at least in my area, to take trips where you might have a trip to France or trip to Mexico, wherever it might be. And even for church groups, I don't recall a trip to Haiti or somewhere else. So, but yet I'm very aware that today it's becoming much more common to do not only trips, especially trips to China. I knew a very common school principal who spent an entire year in China with his family, and a number of teachers that had spent a year teaching in China and came back, and the number of youth who are participating in trips to Haiti, for example, that's all become much more common today than it was years ago. So, we have this politically charged environment going on right now too. What would be, you talked about some of the things to pack, some things like that, but if there was some more advice you wanted to give to, let's say, a chaperone who's going to meet with you and say, we're going down with this group of juniors to Haiti for 8 days. So you had talked about, Bri, talking to someone who's been there, and you've been there. So let's say that I'm taking this group down. Again, what are some things that you're going to tell me that maybe you haven't already shared? And one of the things I want to bring up again too is I think there needs to be an awareness of a political perception too of if you're an American traveling abroad, because that is, or anybody traveling in different countries, that's certainly much different today than it was 20, 25 years ago. So, all right, you're giving me advice. Remember, I've been to 5 states in the last 50 days that I haven't been to before, and I did drive in Orlando during rush hour.
That's pretty bad.
On the
That counts
I-4,
for something.
there should be a T-shirt that you can order online from the Department of Transportation in Florida. I survived the I-4 during rush hour. That's an idea. So
after you get that T-shirt, I would recommend you go to travel.state.gov.
okay, travel.state.gov.
Yep.
I can link that out.
Yeah, put that down there. And that will give you all of the information about visa requirements for the length of your trip, local laws, the customs, your medical care, and then it will give you what's really important is the warning and alert system that you can have updated to your phone that will talk about any political uprising or rebels or terrorist attacks or whatever the current political climate is for that country and that region. It will give you, it'll lay it all out for you, and then it'll advise if you're a family, then you should be cautious about maybe these areas, and if you're an individual, maybe you would be okay, but stick to uncrowded regions. But it gives you a very clear, lots of information about what to look out for and cautions for where to travel and where you should not travel. And I listen closely to that.
Okay.
That's not a joke.
Is there something also with like any vaccinations you have to get before you go to certain places, or check with your doctor and say, hey, I'm traveling here? They're like, okay, you definitely need this set of
Yeah, so there's
vaccinations?
the STEP, which is the Smart Travel Enrollment Program, and you
Okay.
type in all of that itinerary that I mentioned before, if you can just link them to that, and then you kind of type your region and what time of year you plan on going, and they'll give you all of the information about recommended vaccines, things you should definitely get, and then depending on what kind of traveler you are, if you're short-term or long-term, or you have an immune disease deficiency, so it's STEP, the STEP program.
Okay, so the STEP program, and how do you access that? Like, if I just type it in
You just
online
Google.
or Google?
Yeah, Smart Travel Enrollment Program.
Okay,
Yeah, and that will also let the embassy know that you're there, so if anything does happen, they're aware of your whereabouts, and then I would recommend you keeping track of where the embassy is so you can
okay.
get to it if you need to.
And how about personal identification? Like, what should you keep on you? You know, does it make sense to do like a ID bracelet, you know, versus, you know, some other form of ID? Or I guess how does, what do you recommend for that?
I typically wear one of those hidden fanny packs that clip under your shirt and nobody
Okay.
knows that it's there, and I keep most of my cash money in there. I keep my ID, my passport, a copy of my ID and passport, just in case something happens to it. And then any kind of confirmation numbers, flight numbers, currency exchange forms, so that you kind
Okay.
of have a clue what you're getting into.
Right.
And if it's here on your core, you should be able to find it even if you're passed out and someone needs to know who you are.
Okay.
But that way it's not open information for anyone that walks past
Right.
to receive.
I remember when we were at Disney, we had, I guess, RFID wristbands, and we got off of a ride, and our names came up. Thank you, David, for riding this ride. I'm like, oh my goodness.
I think that's weird.
So,
Isn't that a little weird?
Yeah, so you obviously, you know, and it's kind of a new thing. It's like you get into your room that way, and they can track you, and of course, you know, like if either of my daughters would have gotten lost, it would have been instant. They would have scanned and they would have identified who they were, but then they could have also, I believe, located us within the park. So
Does that make you feel safer?
I didn't think about it too much. I was more concerned about, you know, as we walked anywhere near water, every 20 feet, the sign that was staked in the ground saying, watch out for alligators and snakes, don't go close to the water. I did take a photo of like one of them, but yeah, the fact that, you know, the mass redundancy of the signs was kind of making me uncomfortable, because I've never really encountered, yeah, you know, like first an alligator and or a snake, so would have been poorly equipped other than just turning and running.
What if they made them fun? Like every time you passed, the sign would be like, be snake awake.
Snake.
You know, different fun things instead
Yes.
of the redundancy.
Snake awake. Yes.
But it could be a fun part of the trip.
I read where somebody tried to take on one of the poisonous indigenous snakes down in the Orlando area that had gotten into the park, and then tried to throw a towel over it. And anyway, had been bitten and was suing the park. But it was a really bizarre story, because this person could have just not approached the snake at all. It wasn't like the snake was over there and they decided this was their plan, and now they were trying to get some compensation out of this, and it was a very odd story. But yeah, no, they're pretty. They were pretty stern signs, but we were on the second floor, and I was like, I wasn't sure. I didn't think a snake. I'm not sure how well alligators navigate steps. They were pretty wide. Or, you know, if it would just be easier for the alligators to hang out for the people who are more first floor dwellers, not bother with the second floor people. But yeah, very interesting. But didn't see an alligator, didn't see a snake. Did see fish at Epcot in the waters around there, which I thought was a very good sign. Because without the fish, you know, then possibly alligator or Loch Ness monster could have existed, but again, yeah. So, and a lot of things you've described as far as like, the belt with identification, those things are on Amazon. I've seen some of those types of things. So pretty easy to get a hold of. So this has been really, really enlightening, really helpful. And I guess before we wrap up, what do you have planned? You've done so much. I've seen some of the photos, and they'll be incorporated into the video segment of this show. You've been by glaciers, and it's. I remember my 8th grade trip. I think we went to the county jail, and it was new.
Also
and,
educational, right?
We ate at a Chinese restaurant in the neighboring larger community, which was our ethnic outing, and one of my friends spent like $20 on fortune cookies. That was like a big thing, and took them, back. So that is completely a true story. So what do you have for upcoming travels? What's on the horizon for you?
I don't know if you know about this one, actually. So I was planning a 3-week road trip that incorporated some national parks with my son, but that's all out now.
Okay.
I just,
Whoa.
ditched that one, so that itinerary is set to the side to
Okay.
pick up at a later date. But I have a new trip booked in August to go through the Mediterranean and Greece and Italy,
Wow.
and end up in Spain, and I'm bringing my son along for that too.
Wow.
So actually that trip had a little alteration because we're no longer traveling to Turkey because of that political uprising and not being so safe. So we cut that out of the trip.
Okay.
But yeah, it should be great.
So, did you book this like through a travel agent, or because you've done this so much, you do this on your own now, or how does that work?
This was my mom's doing. This was her idea for a trip, so it's
Okay.
through a cruise, and I think the cruise line
Wow.
will decide based on political things where you can and cannot
Okay.
travel. They usually err on the safety side.
So before you take the cruise, make sure you watch Pirates of the Caribbean, just so you're fully informed of what
Good.
can all happen out on the
Right.
open seas. Because wow, that's amazing. So yeah, Bri had a road trip planned for this summer across the United States with her son, and I've actually been listening to an audiobook from a man in Minnesota who's about my age, who just got done road tripping the country and wrote this book. And he talks about the kind of the places to go which are off the beaten path in different states. Now he also talks about things like how to sleep in your car and stuff like that. I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that for me, but but he talks about some really interesting places to go, and also like places not to go. Like, don't go here in the middle of summer, or like you can't go on these roads in winter, and things like that. So I'm kind of listening to that because I want to plan a trip out west, and then also I've never been to Gettysburg, and want to go out to Gettysburg, which I've always had an interest in that. So you've idled those plans. You've done the cruise plans coming up. So anything that you've had to do specifically before we wrap up to start to prepare for that trip? Anything brand new there that's going to be like?
Anything brand new. And then same goes for if I'm leaving for any extended period of time and my son is staying with my parents, then I write a release form saying you have all the right to make any major medical decisions in my behalf if you can't contact me, because oftentimes I can't be contacted.
Okay.
So that's another little one.
When you say write a release, do you have it notarized or anything like that, or is it nothing that formal?
I've had one notarized, and now I just staple them together.
Okay, the old staple,
Yeah.
notary.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Bri, we're gonna wrap up. This has been amazing, and I'm going back to the story when you're 17 and you're in Haiti and being, put in the room and not knowing exactly what's going on, and there's a guard with a machine gun, but just having that awareness of how that situation is developing, and then also as it kind of lost steam and you were able to exit that situation and then continue to go on. Traveling abroad, I'm assuming, is wonderful and exciting from looking at some of the photos that you shared. I mean, it's amazing you've been on glaciers and just, I mean, it's picturesque and cultural. So it's something that's wonderful, but it's something also you need to have very much of awareness and vigilance in going, because as you shared, in many aspects much different, even like in the way you might dress in one particular region of a country to another region and so forth. So anything you want to share, any pointers?
Well, I don't want
we
to
wrap up?
discourage anyone from going. I think that traveling ultimately helps you learn about yourself and helps you expand what you thought was normal. And I think that's really important. And I think even with all of the crazy stories and maybe the scary situations, it is still totally worth it. And that should just show even more what a valuable experience traveling can be. And I encourage you, if you have any interest, to just do your research first, be prepared, and then go for it.
And that's something with the internet today. I mean, the amount of research that can be done is it's at everybody's fingertips. And I'm going to echo onto that in a much lower level capacity, but when we made the decision to go to Florida, which was the first time to go to Florida, and we could have flown, but I wanted to drive because I wanted to go. I had never been through Kentucky and Tennessee, and I wanted to go through some of these areas and to just see what it was like. Now, I know that wasn't much for reconnaissance, but I wanted to do that, and I'm very glad that I did, because I got to see some really cool things. Actually, in Dothan, Alabama, I got to see the largest, I believe, fiberglass peanut in the United States of America. So absolutely incredible.
And you'll never forget that peanut.
I will not.
Yeah.
And it is the peanut capital of the world. So if you have peanut allergies and you are looking at a place to live, Dothan, Dothan, Alabama, off your list right now. Don't even go there, because every other place is like boiled peanuts, peanut soup, peanut burger, whatever it is. But just, even there was a sense of, after driving through the Memphis rush hour and driving on the I-4, of kind of an accomplishment. And then driving through Omaha, even though my Garmin kind of decided to go rogue when I was in Omaha and take me behind Offutt Air Force Base to a part that was marked with barricades. Do not pass these barricades, which I did pass because I thought maybe the wedding reception was back there. And it wasn't, and I had to turn the car around, and then also tell my Garmin, never again. But then, yes, it did finally get me to where I needed to go. But actually, I feel like a more confident traveler now, and I'm not anywhere at the level that you're at, but I'm steps closer to doing that. And after we've had this conversation today, and for people listening, I feel I would be confident in taking a trip out of the country. You know, I'd be, and the value, what I would gain from that. So I'm excited. I'm really excited that you shared your stories, and I think your advice is spot on and valuable, and appreciate your time today, Bri.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. That was an amazing interview with Bri Hansen. Just incredible stories and very valuable tips to be a safe traveler, no matter where you go in the world. I didn't have an opportunity to share my story of spring breaking in Little Rock, Arkansas, back when I was in college. Nothing quite like it, folks, and something I definitely would recommend to nobody. I want to give a thank you out to John Grant and the 405 Media for hosting the Safety Doc podcast. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I am sporting the grout fit today, which is the gray outfit or the sweatcedo, whatever you want to call it. This is kind of the late night addendum to the editing of the Bri interview. So yes, and it looks like I do need a shave here. Kind of getting a little scraggly, but again, a wonderful, wonderful podcast, an area we hadn't talked about on the Safety Doc before. So glad that Bri was able to spend that time with us, and look forward to producing this and getting it out and sharing it, especially right now with such tensions and apprehensions about international travel, and the websites, the resources that Bri shared, where you can get information and advice, such as contacting someone at a university in a location you're traveling to, knowing where the embassy is, redundant copies of maps, and so forth. Just very valuable information. I know things that I will take under consideration during my next trip, whether that be domestic or that be out of the country. Not sure it's going to be out of the country, but probably more domestic here for the Safety Doc. You can subscribe to this show, so you can go into YouTube right here, subscribe, and every week I drop a new show. You can go into iTunes, subscribe, free, no charge. SoundCloud gets you a little easier access to the MP3. I'm also on the Podmosphere, and I do produce a blog post every week too. The show is broadcast on the 405media.com out of Los Angeles, California, part of their regular programming, 1 o'clock Monday through Saturday each week. So that is the League of Extraordinary Podcasters. A huge thank you to the Typical Daddy podcast, especially Hector, for spending hours with me on enhancing the audio quality of my program, and then also helping me to install a program which is going to enable much smoother Skype interviews. And that is actually our guest for next week, is going to be Hector from Typical Daddy Podcast, a podcast of a group of dads getting together to talk about issues affecting dads and what it's like to be a dad, all the way from potty training your kids to concerns about bullying, of your children. And Hector is an incredible, giving, just a wonderful podcaster, which is kind of native to the podcasting community. And I'm glad to have him on the show next week. So again, another wonderful person to bring onto the show to then share out to you. You're not the typical listener. Again, if you're following the Safety Doc, hats off to you. You want to be provided with intelligent content, free of the rhetoric, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your loyalty. We are growing with Twitter followers at SafetyPhD. You can follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much, and stay safe.